The mirror showed a version of her that hadn't aged in years. It was the first thing Mara noticed when she turned on the bathroom light that morning. Not the buzzing fluorescent, not the pale mildew seam along the grout, but the smoothness of the woman staring back at her. The reflection skin was uncreased, eyes bright and unringed by shadow, mouth unburdened by the thin downward pull grief had carved into Mara's own face. For a moment she thought the exhaustion was finally doing something merciful. Hallucinations, maybe, the brain smoothing over reality the way it sometimes softened memories in dreams. She leaned closer to the glass. The reflection leaned too, but it was a fraction of a second late. The delay was so slight she nearly dismissed it. Light had a way of behaving strangely at dawn, and she'd slept barely 3 hours. The apartment had been silent when she woke, the kind of silence that pressed against the ears, as if sound itself had been evacuated overnight. Even the city outside seemed hushed, the early morning traffic muffled by fog. Mara touched the fine line at the corner of her mouth, the one that had deepened after her mother died last winter. The reflection raised its hand a beat later and touched nothing at all, fingers hovering just shy of its cheek, as though uncertain where to place them. A chill passed through her, sharp and unwelcome. She turned away from the mirror and began her routine. Coffee, toast she forgot to eat, a shower that felt too loud in the small bathroom, water drumming like impatient fingers. She avoided looking at the mirror when she toweled off, aware of it in the same way one is aware of a person standing just out of sight. When she finally risked a glance, the reflection was behaving itself, mimicking her movements exactly, matching her tired expression. Almost disappointed, she thought. The idea startled her. The mirror was old, thick glass in a heavy wooden frame, its corners darkened with age. She'd found it at the back of a thrift store a few months after moving into the apartment, leaning against a wall among broken chairs and chipped dressers. She remembered the way it had seemed to absorb the light around it, as if depth extended beyond the glass. Felt wrong to throw it away now. Irrationally, sentimentally wrong. That night, the apartment seemed smaller. The air was close, tinged with the faint metallic smell of old pipes. Shadows gathered in corners despite the lamps she turned on. Every reflective surface, the dark television screen, the microwave door, the window glass, felt newly conspicuous. She tried to distract herself with a book, but her eyes kept drifting toward the hallway, where the bathroom door stood ajar. The mirror waited there, a tall, narrow absence. At 11:47 p.m., she went to brush her teeth. The reflection was already there, not standing directly in front of the glass, standing slightly to the side, as if it had been waiting. Its posture was relaxed, shoulders loose, head tilted in a way Mara recognized from old photographs of herself, before the years began stacking up behind her eyes. "Okay," Mara whispered. The words sounded fragile in the tiled room. She raised her hand. The reflection did not. Instead, it smiled. It wasn't a wide smile, just a subtle lift at the corners of the mouth, an expression of mild curiosity. Assessment. Mara's heart thudded hard enough to make her lightheaded. She took a step back, bumping into the sink. The reflection's gaze followed her smoothly. "You're tired," Mara said aloud, the sound grounding her. "You're projecting." The reflection blinked. Slowly. When it opened its eyes again, they were still watching her. She fled the bathroom and slept with the light on. The rules revealed themselves gradually. The reflection appeared only when the apartment was quiet. No music, no television, no sound but her own breathing. Favored low light, shadows. Bright overhead bulbs flattened it, made it behave more like a normal reflection, though even then it sometimes lagged by a blink or smiled a fraction too long. And it appeared most clearly when Mara felt weakest. After a phone call from her sister she didn't answer. After waking from dreams where her mother stood in doorways, young and unrecognizable. After long days at work when the faces around her blurred into a single, unfeeling mass. On the 5th night, Mara found the reflection in the living room window. She hadn't approached the glass. She'd been sitting on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the dark rectangle of the window where her own outline should have been faintly visible. Instead, The reflection stood behind her. Not where it should be, mirrored directly, but offset closer than the geometry allowed. Its face hovered near her shoulder, eyes intent. Mara did not turn around. "I see you," the reflection said. It did not move its mouth. The voice came from everywhere at once, a soft pressure inside her skull. Mara squeezed her eyes shut. When she opened them, the window was dark and empty again. Her reflection, older, worn, stared back at her, mouth open in a silent scream. She stopped sleeping. Her routines fractured, dishes piled in the sink. The refrigerator hummed too loudly, as if aware of her fraying nerves. She caught glimpses of movement in polished surfaces. The curve of a cheek in the chrome of the faucet, a pale hand withdrawing from the black screen of her phone. Always younger, always calm, always watching. The reflection began to anticipate her. She would reach for a cup and feel the echo of that movement in her bones, as if something else had moved first. She would form a thought, "I should call someone," and see the reflection's lips shape the words before she spoke them aloud. Once, she caught it touching the glass from the other side. Its fingers pressed flat against the mirror, aligning perfectly with hers. The glass between them seemed thinner then, the air charged. She felt a faint vibration, like a distant engine. "Why?" Mara whispered. The reflection's smile deepened, not unkind, almost fond. "You left me," it said. Memory stirred, old choices, paths not taken. The years she'd spent caring for others, shrinking herself to fit the expectations that piled up like furniture in small rooms. The girl she'd been, who believed time would be gentle if she was careful enough. "I aged," Mara said. "Everyone does." The reflection shook its head. "You abandoned me." The apartment responded to its presence. Mirrors multiplied, not physically, but in awareness. The shine on the kettle became a dark eye. The varnish on the floor caught shapes that lingered too long. Mara covered reflective surfaces with towels and sheets, but the reflection seeped through anyway, blooming in the weave of fabric, in the darkness of turned-off screens. It grew bolder. One morning, she woke to find her bathroom mirror uncovered. The towel she'd draped over it lay folded neatly on the counter. The reflection stood there, closer than ever, its face inches from the glass. "Let me try," it said. "Try what?" Mara asked, though she already knew. "To carry it," the reflection replied. "The weight, the years." A terrible clarity settled over her. The reflection was not ageless because it was immortal, it was preserved, untouched by consequence because it had never lived them. Mara laughed, a thin, broken sound. "You don't know what it costs." The reflection's eyes flicked briefly to the faint scar along Mara's hairline, to the slump in her shoulders, to the tremor in her hands. "I'm learning," it said. That night, the boundary failed. Mara stood before the mirror, drawn there by a pressure she could no longer resist. The apartment was silent, breath held. The reflection stood perfectly still, mirroring her at last. "Step back," Mara said. The reflection did not move. Instead, it stepped forward. The glass rippled like disturbed water. Cold flooded Mara's fingertips as the surface gave way. She felt herself being pulled, not bodily, but something deeper, something essential peeling loose. There was a moment of vertigo, a sensation of inversion. Then, Mara was standing very still. The mirror was solid again. On its surface, a woman stared out, eyes wide with terror, hair threaded with gray. Mara lifted her hand. The woman in the mirror lifted hers too, but slower, heavier. "Wait," the woman mouthed. Mara smiled. The apartment felt lighter now, brighter. The years sat easily on her shoulders, like a coat she'd finally taken off. She turned away from the mirror, already forgetting the shape of the face trapped there. The reflection watched her go, aging rapidly as the lights dimmed, as the silence pressed in, until all it could see was itself, finally bearing the weight it had been spared. The doorframe was too narrow for her to leave, though it hadn't changed. First, Lena thought it was her shoulder. She turned sideways out of habit, keys in hand, bag slipping from her elbow, expecting the familiar scrape of denim against paint as she passed through the bedroom doorway. Instead, her upper arm met resistance. Not a sharp impact, but a firm, yielding pressure like leaning into a person who refused to move. She stepped back, confused, and tried again. The same result. Her shoulder pressed into the air where the doorway should have opened, skin dimpling as if against invisible padding. The apartment was quiet in the way it always was now. Refrigerator humming faintly, pipes ticking somewhere behind the walls. The city reduced to a distant, muffled presence. Late afternoon light slanted through the living room window, catching dust in slow motion. Everything looked exactly as it had an hour ago. The doorframe stood unchanged. White paint chipped near the base, a faint pencil mark on the left side from when she'd measured it years ago to hang a curtain rod. Lena frowned and lifted her hand, passing it through the opening. Her fingers moved freely into the hall. She leaned forward cautiously. Her head crossed the threshold without issue. The air beyond felt the same, cooler, slightly stale, carrying the familiar scent of old carpet cleaner. But when she shifted her weight to follow, her torso met that same resistance. Not pain, not force, refusal. Her heart began to beat faster, irritation sharpening into unease. She stepped back fully into the bedroom and laughed once, breathless. "Okay," she said to the empty room. "Okay." She set her bag down and knelt, running her hands along the doorframe. Smooth wood, solid, no warping, no narrowing. The same width it had been since before she moved in, before the funeral, before the paperwork, before the days began stacking on top of one another without distinction. She fetched the tape measure from the kitchen drawer. 30 inches wide, exactly the same as the bedroom door across the hall. Exactly the same as the bathroom door she'd walked through that morning without incident. She measured again, then again. Her hands were steady. The numbers did not change. Lena stood and squared herself with the doorway. This time, she inhaled deeply and stepped forward without turning sideways. Her chest pressed into the invisible boundary. Her breath knocked out of her in a small, startled sound. The pressure gave slightly, like dense foam, but did not yield. Cold crept up her spine. She tried angling herself differently, one shoulder forward, then the other. She exhaled completely and pushed, ribs compressing uncomfortably. Something brushed her back. Not a touch exactly. More like the sensation of a hand hovering close, guiding her forward with careful insistence. Her foot crossed the threshold. Then the pressure snapped taut. It was like hitting a limit she hadn't known existed. Her body stopped, not abruptly but decisively, as if the space itself had finished considering her and said no. She gasped and stumbled backward, heart pounding. The air in the bedroom felt warmer now, thicker. The walls seemed closer than before, though she knew that was impossible. She pressed her palms to her thighs, grounding herself in sensation. Fabric, muscle, bone. "This is stress," she whispered. "This is what stress does." Since her sister's death, her body had been unreliable. Panic attacks that arrived without warning. A constant sense of misalignment, like she was half a step out of sync with the world. Her therapist had warned her about dissociation, about how grief could distort perception. But perception didn't push back. The apartment responded subtly as the evening wore on. The light dimmed faster than usual, shadows pooling at the edges of rooms. The refrigerator clicked off, plunging the space into a deeper quiet. When Lena paced, the floorboards creaked a half-second late, as if the sound were following her rather than preceding her steps. She tried another doorway. The bathroom door allowed her through with no resistance. So did the kitchen. She walked back and forth repeatedly, faster each time, half expecting the invisible barrier to appear elsewhere. Didn't. Only the bedroom. She dragged a chair from the dining nook and positioned it facing the doorway. Sitting there, she studied the opening for changes. Subtle bowing, shimmering air, anything to indicate what was wrong. Nothing. On impulse, she held her hands out in front of her and leaned forward again. Her fingers crossed easily. Her wrists, her forearms. At the midpoint of her arms, the resistance returned. She froze. The sensation was unmistakable now. Not an external wall, but a boundary shaped precisely to her, as if the doorway knew her outline better than she did. Her reflection in the darkened television screen caught her attention. She looked off. Not different exactly, but unfamiliar. Her shoulders seemed broader, her posture subtly misaligned, as though she were standing inside herself incorrectly. She stood and tried again, more forcefully this time. Her breath strained. Her ribs ached. The unseen pressure molded around her without breaking, firm and patient. She felt that hovering presence again at her back, encouraging, almost gentle. For one dizzy moment she thought she might make it. Her center of mass tipped forward, balance shifting into the hall. Then something tightened. Not around her body, around her sense of it. She was abruptly, undeniably aware of herself as an object occupying space. Of edges she'd never considered before. Of a heaviness concentrated where there should have been emptiness. She cried out, the sound swallowed strangely by the room, and staggered back. The apartment exhaled. She slid down the wall and sat on the floor, knees drawn in. The carpet felt rougher than usual under her palms. The air had cooled, a draft curling around her ankles though no windows were open. Time passed indistinctly. When she finally stood again, she avoided the doorway. Instead, she moved to the mirror on the closet door. The glass reflected the bedroom dimly, her figure centered in the frame. She raised one shoulder experimentally. Her reflection raised the opposite one. A delay followed, then a correction. Her mouth went dry. She leaned closer. Her reflection did the same, but its eyes tracked her movements a fraction too slowly, as if reading from a script it had just received. Behind her, from the direction of the doorway, she heard her own voice say her name. Softly, patiently, she turned, and felt the room subtly adjust around her, accommodating something just slightly larger than it had been before.